3 years ago, my father handed me his Mont Blanc pen across his office desk. Just a formality, he said. Family helps family. That's how I ended up co-signing a $2 million business loan. I didn't ask questions. I was Grace Mitchell, 36, corporate counsel for mergers and acquisitions in Seattle, and still trying to prove I belonged in a family that never truly saw me. I thought helping him would mean something. I thought maybe for once he'd look at me like more than just the daughter who asked too many questions. Yesterday, I found out he'd forged my signature on 2 other loans. And the same pen he used to ask for help? I used it today to sign myself out of his business permanently. Before I tell you what happened after that, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? And if you've ever been pushed aside by people who only loved you when it was convenient, hit subscribe. You're not alone. I grew up in Palo Alto. Big money, big image, big pressure. We had staff who polished the mailbox, for God's sake. But what we didn't have was warmth. My brother Ethan fit the mold. I didn't. He joined the family real estate firm by 24. I went to Columbia Law on partial scholarship. Paid my own way, 3 part-time jobs, no complaints. My parents sent me flowers not to graduation, but to my office, 2 weeks late. When I fell in love with Daniel, a high school English teacher. They smiled through gritted teeth. He's kind, my mom had said. But what does he bring to your future? That was always the question. What's in it for them? So when the text came last week, don't come to the family reunion. We've made our decision. I finally made mine. And it started with a signature. 3 years ago, my father's office smelled like expensive leather and silent pressure. I remember the sunlight catching the edge of the loan folder as he slid it toward me. Not a discussion. Not a request. Just a presumption. It's for the Harborview project, he'd said. Barely looking up from his phone. The bank needs stronger collateral and your credit is spotless. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I knew what it meant. Being useful was my only way in. You're the lawyer in the family, he added with a faint smile. Surely you know how this works. Yes, I did. I knew exactly how it worked. You give them what they want. And maybe, just maybe, you get to stay in the photo. So I signed. I didn't know then that the ink I left behind would be used as leverage. Not just for the $2 million Harborview loan, but for 2 more that I never even saw. I also didn't know that the very day I co-signed that loan, my father had lunch with Senator Bradford's daughter, lining up Ethan's next move. That was the part that always got me. How they played the long game. But only if you were part of their plan. I wasn't. A year after that, I flew home for my mother's birthday. Daniel came with me. It was our first time seeing my parents since Thanksgiving, and the frosty reception we'd received for daring to love without a resume attached. My father barely looked up when Daniel shook his hand. My mother, ever the diplomat, pulled me aside in the kitchen. The guest list tonight is sensitive, she said, dabbing her lipstick. Perhaps Daniel might excuse himself early? Sensitive. Because 3 board members from the real estate firm were attending. Because their daughter's teacher husband might not fit the photo backdrop. Daniel left after dinner quietly. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Call me if you need to tap out early." I stayed. And listened to my brother talk about square footage, development permits, and his upcoming engagement to Madeline Bradford. And I watched my parents beam. Like they had built something. Like it had all worked. And maybe it had for them. But I kept coming back. Because somewhere deep inside, I still thought that one day I'd be enough. Then came the family magazine shoot. 3 generations of Mitchells on the balcony of our old estate. Ethan was there. So was his fiancée, her parents, their golden retriever, and even their brand new assistant. You know who wasn't? Me. I found out about it through a colleague's LinkedIn post. Inspiring legacy leadership from the Mitchell family. A blueprint of American excellence. I stared at that photo for 10 full minutes. They hadn't just cut me out of the family gathering. They'd erased me from the narrative. When I called my mother to ask about it, she said, "Oh, sweetheart. It was just something Ethan arranged last minute." Last minute. With a fully catered brunch, a professional photo crew, and monogrammed robes. It wasn't just exclusion. It was strategy. I told Daniel that night. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just held me while I cried. The ugly, choking kind, the kind that feels like grief, even though no one's died. They've been telling you in 100 small ways, he whispered. You just needed one big one to finally hear it. And still, I didn't walk away. Not then. It took the text. When I got that message, don't come to the family reunion. I was in the middle of reviewing the final contracts for a deal that would shape my entire career. I read it once, twice. Then I put my phone face down and finished my presentation. 30 minutes later, when the room emptied, I opened my messages again. There it was. No apology. No explanation. Just a clean break. Because I'd chosen not to marry someone from their world. Because I hadn't come back to work at the firm. Because I was no longer useful. That night, Daniel found me staring at the ceiling. So what now? He asked gently. I turned to him and said, I think it's time I unsign myself from that loan. And for the first time in years. I meant it. The next morning, I opened my laptop and searched for Jennifer Langston. She wasn't just any attorney. She was the woman I trained under during my second year at Columbia Law, the only partner I'd ever seen walk into a courtroom in 4-inch heels and leave with a settlement in her favor before opening statements. I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years. But when she picked up, her voice was warm. Grace Mitchell. Haven't heard from you since that biotech disaster in 21. What can I do for you? I need to remove myself from a $2 million loan I co-signed for my father. I didn't pause. Didn't hedge. Didn't explain. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission. Jennifer didn't miss a beat. Send me the original agreement and your current family status, emotionally and legally. Emotionally severed. Legally still attached. She let out a short breath. Let's fix that. By noon, we had a plan. If the bank agreed, my removal would trigger a clause requiring new collateral within 30 days, or the loan would accelerate, full repayment due immediately. Will this damage your family financially? Jennifer asked carefully. It'll inconvenience them, I replied. Not destroy them. They'll just have to solve a problem I'm no longer required to carry. Then I'll have the paperwork by tomorrow morning. You'll need to sign in person. Send it. Just like that, I was taking myself out of the equation. And it felt clean. Not angry. Not vindictive. Just final. Daniel and I went to dinner that night, a quiet Italian place near Green Lake. He let me order pasta and dessert without comment. Which in our relationship meant he knew I needed comfort but wouldn't say it out loud. So you're really doing it, he said over tiramisu. I am. They'll react. I know. He reached across the table and took my hand. Then let them. You're not responsible for holding their image together anymore. I didn't cry. That surprised me. The next day, I signed the paperwork. Jennifer slid it across the table in her glass-walled office overlooking downtown Seattle. Her assistant handed me a pen. Just a simple black rollerball, nothing like the heavy Mont Blanc my father had once pressed into my palm. Are you sure? She asked. I nodded. Absolutely. The moment the ink dried, something shifted inside me. Not relief. Not triumph. Just release. I'd been carrying their weight on my back for so long I didn't even realize how much straighter I could stand without it. The bank notified Wilson Development Group the next morning at 9:02 a.m. Eastern. By 10:15 I had 11 missed calls. My father. My mother. 3 different numbers registered to the company. 2 voicemails labeled urgent. I ignored them. By 11 o'clock, my assistant Kelsey popped her head into my office. There's a man on line 2 claiming to be your father's lawyer. He says it's a legal emergency. Take a message. She blinked. Want me to tell him you're in a deposition? No need to lie. I smile faintly. Tell him I'm busy. Which I am. By noon, there were 24 calls. 2 emails. 1 text from my brother Ethan. Becca. Call me. Now. That name. I hadn't heard Becca in years. Not since we were kids running barefoot through our grandparents' vineyard in Napa. Before the legacy talk, the corporate suits. The pressure. I didn't reply. At 2:30, I walked into a strategy meeting for our next merger proposal, calm, collected, and entirely unreachable by the people who once held power over me. At 3:15, Kelsey came back. Your parents are in the lobby. I froze. What? They're here. In person. No appointment. Your mother looks like she's been crying. Your father, not so much. Of course not. Tell security to escort them out. Kelsey hesitated. Are you sure? Tell them they can contact my attorney, just like I did when I signed that loan. Later that evening, my firm's managing partner, Charles Alton, called me into his office. Your parents showed up here today, he said flatly. Yes, I heard. They mentioned a loan. Legal implications. Words like reputation and press exposure. I kept my voice steady. It's a personal matter. And it's handled. He looked at me for a long moment. Good. Because what you've done for this firm, the Willis merger, the Newport acquisition, your client retention numbers, that's what matters to me. Not your last name. I exhaled. That right there was the validation I'd never gotten from home. And suddenly I didn't need it from them anymore. I didn't expect to answer Ethan's call. But I did. It was nearly 8 p.m. And I was reviewing notes for an upcoming arbitration when my phone lit up again. Ethan Mitchell. This time something in me paused. Not out of obligation. Not out of nostalgia. Just curiosity. I picked up. Grace, he said, breath short. Dad's losing it. You need to meet with him. Why would I do that? Because he's threatening litigation. Against you. Against the bank. Against anyone he thinks embarrassed him. I laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. I exercised my legal right to remove myself from a loan. If that's embarrassing, maybe he should have protected his reputation before asking me to co-sign. I know. But please, just meet him. One time. No. Palmer House. Tomorrow. Noon. He'll be there. I will too. I hesitated. You'll be there. Yes. As his echo? Or as my brother? There was a pause on the line. Then, you'll find out tomorrow. I arrived at the Palmer House exactly at noon. I wore a charcoal gray suit, the one I saved for contract closings and depositions that determine careers. Hair up. Pearl studs. No expression. My mother stood when I walked in. Sweetheart, she said, stepping forward with outstretched arms. I didn't move. My father didn't look up. He sat stiffly like this was a boardroom negotiation he hadn't prepared for. I have 45 minutes, I said, pulling out the chair across from them. This family deserves more than that, my father said without lifting his eyes. This family gave me 14 words in a text. That's what earned you 45 minutes. The waiter came. They ordered coffee. I asked for sparkling water. No one spoke while the drinks arrived. Finally, he leaned in. You've embarrassed me, Grace. You embarrassed yourself the second you forged my signature, I replied calmly. My mother gasped. What is she talking about? I turned to her. Check the equipment loan from 2020. And the revolving line of credit from the following year. My name's on both. My signature isn't. She looked at my father. He didn't deny it. It was a bridge strategy. Short term. I intended to tell you. You never intended anything but control. We kept this business alive through a recession, through COVID, through backdoor deals you couldn't possibly understand. And yet, you needed my spotless credit to do it. The silence was colder than the ice in my glass. Then Ethan walked in. He wasn't wearing his usual navy blazer. Just a collared shirt, sleeves rolled. And he looked tired. But something in his eyes had changed. He sat down beside me, not across. She deserves the truth, he said. Ethan, this isn't your place, our father snapped. No, he replied. It hasn't been. Because I never made it my place. But that ends today. He turned to me. Grace, the Harborview project was under federal audit when Dad asked you to co-sign that loan. He didn't disclose it to the bank. Or to you. If they find out. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Are you saying I co-signed a loan under false pretenses? Technically. Ethan started, then looked at our father. She has a right to know. It was a calculated risk, our father said. And it paid off. You forged my name to hide the risk. That's not calculated. That's criminal. My mother whispered. Harold, tell me this isn't true. He stood. You're both being dramatic. Grace has always been too sensitive. Ethan, you're letting sentiment cloud judgment. He turned to me. Reinstate the guarantee. That's all I'm asking. And this ends quietly. No. If you think you can cut ties without consequences. I'm not cutting ties. You did. I'm just honoring your decision. Asterisk, you'll regret this, he hissed. I stood, placing a crisp business card on the table. Any future communication goes through Jennifer Langston, my attorney. I turned to Ethan. Thank you for showing up. Asterisk. I'm sorry it took this long, he said. But I'm done pretending this legacy is worth more than people. Outside the hotel, the air felt colder than expected. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until it escaped as mist. Daniel was waiting near the curb, leaning against the car with 2 coffees. How'd it go? He asked, handing me the cup. I sipped slowly. They wanted me quiet, useful, obedient. And what are you now? I smiled finally. Untouchable. 2 days after the meeting at the Palmer house, a letter arrived at my apartment. Not an email. Not a voicemail. An actual envelope, cream paper, heavy stock, the kind that screamed, "Serious people wrote this." Inside was a single-page document. An offer. In recognition of your prior support and to honor family privacy, we are prepared to offer a full release from all past loan obligations. In exchange for mutual non-disparagement and confidentiality. At the bottom was a line for my signature. And a check. $200,000. Dated. Ready. I read the letter 3 times. It wasn't subtle. It was hush money. They wanted me to walk away quietly without raising red flags, without legal follow-up, without mentioning the word fraud. And they were willing to pay. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I just sat there. $200,000. The cost of my silence. That night I showed it to Daniel. He didn't even blink. You're not seriously considering this, right? Of course not. Then why do you look like someone just offered you a way out? Because maybe a part of me still wanted to be wrong. Maybe I wanted to believe my father panicked, made a mistake and now wanted peace. But deep down I knew better. This wasn't reconciliation. It was damage control. The next morning, I brought the letter to Jennifer. She barely glanced at it before setting it aside. Classic move, she said. The check makes it look generous. But what they're really buying is your future voice. Legally, what would I be giving up? Any right to sue. Speak publicly. Testify. If there's a deeper fraud, you be complicit by silence. What do you mean deeper? Jennifer tapped her pen twice, then slid a folder across the desk. After you signed off the loan, I had my team pull all the commercial filings for Wilson Development Group. One of the lines of credit they took out under your forged signature? It's tied to a shell company. That doesn't exist. I blinked. Doesn't exist? No tax ID. No registration. The address listed is a vacant lot in Nevada. I sat back in my chair. That means what exactly? That they may have created a false subsidiary to move money around and used your name to do it. I swallowed. Is that criminal? If intentional, yes. Federal. Potential wire fraud. Money laundering. Bank misrepresentation. I stared at the check again. $200,000. It wouldn't even cover legal fees if this spiraled into litigation. What if I don't sign but don't report? I asked. Jennifer shook her head. Grace, if a federal investigation opens and you had prior knowledge but stayed quiet, you'd be part of the obstruction. There it was. The catch. My father hadn't just tried to silence me. He tried to trap me. Make me complicit. In writing. That evening, I sat on our balcony staring at the Seattle skyline. Daniel came out with tea and didn't say a word. He just sat beside me. After a while, I whispered. I wanted to believe they were better than this. That maybe I was overreacting all those years. You weren't, he said simply. And now if I speak up, the company might collapse. Jobs could be lost. My brother. Daniel turned to me. And if you stay silent, who gets hurt next? The next morning, I sent an email to Jennifer. Decline the offer. And begin the process of filing a whistleblower disclosure with the State Department of Financial Institutions. 5 minutes later, she replied. Understood. I'll handle it. By the end of the week, a federal compliance officer had contacted her for a preliminary statement. And just like that, the story stopped being about me and started being about what they'd done. The fallout began quietly. An internal audit was triggered at Wilson Development Group. The Nevada shell entity disappeared from the online database 2 days later, but not before Jennifer's team had screen captured every record. My father hadn't called. Neither had my mother. But Ethan had. I heard about the audit. he said, his voice low. I didn't want it to be this way. I know. I had to protect myself. But this might sink him. Grace, Ethan said gently. He did that himself. You just turned on the lights. The email hit my inbox at 6:47 a.m. Subject line, request for comment. Grace Mitchell and Wilson Development Group. Sender, Kelsey Marsh. Business Investigations Desk, Seattle Chronicle. Ms. Mitchell, we are preparing a feature on allegations involving Wilson Development Group and your potential role as whistleblower. You have until 6 p.m. to respond. There it was. The silence I'd been swimming in. Shattered. I forwarded it to Jennifer immediately. Her reply came fast. Say nothing. Let me talk to their legal desk. But by noon, 2 more outlets had reached out. And at 2:12 p.m., a push notification lit up my phone. Breaking. Top Seattle firm under audit for forged financial documents, insider source linked to family member. No name. But it didn't have to. Anyone with Wi-Fi could connect the dots. My inbox exploded. Clients asking for clarity. Old law school classmates sending "Are you okay?" texts. 3 different PR firms offering to help shape the narrative. The story was no longer mine to contain. I was pacing my apartment when Ethan called. You saw it. Yeah. Dad's furious. Mom's in shock. And investors are calling every 5 minutes. Are you okay? I don't know, he admitted. He's blaming everyone. Me. You. Even the accounting team. Let me guess, never himself. Pretty much. There was a pause. He asked if I'd take over as CEO if things get worse. My stomach turned. Are you considering it? I don't know. His voice cracked. Part of me wants to fix what he broke. But another part wonders if it's even worth saving. That's a question only you can answer, Ethan. You think I'm part of the problem. I think you're standing at the line. And you get to choose which side you stay on. He didn't respond right away. Then quietly, thank you for not hanging up. At 5:30 p.m. my phone rang again. Mom. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I suppose you're not surprised I'm calling. Honestly, I wasn't sure you would. I've been thinking about everything. Watching the news. Reading that letter your father sent you. So she knew. You should have said something. And would you have believed me? I asked. The question landed like a weight in the silence between us. No. She whispered. Because I didn't want to. I waited. Then she said something I hadn't expected. Something that made me sit down. I once signed a contract I didn't understand early in our marriage. He'd put the company in both our names to secure more leverage. I thought it was romantic at the time. And it wasn't? It was strategic. A bitter laugh. And by the time I realized it, he'd already turned me into a signature. Not a person. I didn't know what to say. Grace. I see now what I let happen to you. I saw him use your name like he used mine. And I said nothing because I thought silence kept the peace. I closed my eyes. It never did, I said. It just delayed the war. That night, I wrote a statement. A personal one. Jennifer reviewed it. Approved it. And the next morning I sent it to the Seattle Chronicle. Yes. I removed myself from a loan agreement I was manipulated into signing. Yes, I discovered additional documents bearing my forged signature. Yes, I chose to come forward, not to destroy a company, but to protect myself and others from being used in silence. It wasn't flashy, but it was the truth. That same day, Ethan sent me a photo. A candid one. Him holding his newborn daughter, born 2 weeks early. He captioned it, I want her to grow up knowing what honesty looks like, even when it's messy. And that was the turning point. Not the articles. Not the legal filings. A baby, a new generation, and a choice to not pass down the damage. 3 weeks later, I stood behind a podium at the Women in Law Summit in downtown Seattle. It wasn't my first time speaking at a legal event, but it was the first time I wasn't there to talk about mergers, or deal structures, or how to manage $1 billion closing. This time I was telling my story. Not the polished version. Not the LinkedIn summary. But the real one. I co-signed a $2 million loan for a company I didn't work for. I did it because I thought it would earn me something I had never received. A place in a family that only valued me when I was convenient. I paused. When I removed my name, they sent me a check. Not a thank you. Not an apology. Just an amount they thought would buy my silence. The room was silent. Not out of judgment but recognition. Because so many women in that room had done the same. Signed things they didn't fully agree with. Made themselves smaller to keep the peace. Stayed quiet to preserve someone else's comfort. After the talk, a woman in her late 50s approached me. Eyes glossy, voice low. Thank you, she said. I didn't know how much of myself I'd given up until I heard you say it out loud. That night, my mom called. Not to rehash the past. Not to beg for reunification. Just to talk. You sounded strong up there, she said. Not angry. Just free. I am. Can I ask something selfish? Always. Can I come to your wedding? I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure. But because, for the first time, I got to decide what family meant. Yes. But only if you come as yourself. Not as dad's +1. There was a long pause. Then quietly. I filed for separation last week. I closed my eyes. Not out of pain. But peace. A few days later, I received a letter from Ethan. Handwritten. On real paper. With a photo tucked inside. His daughter, wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, one hand curled around his finger. We named her Clara Grace. For strength. For clarity. For the sister who taught me both. And then came the final encounter. I hadn't planned to see him again. But I ran into my father at the Bellevue Club, where my firm was hosting a private client brunch. He was standing alone by the bar, swirling a drink he hadn't touched. His hair was grayer. His posture looser. The sharpness in his eyes dulled. When he saw me, he didn't move. Didn't gesture. Just stared. I approached first. Because I always had. Hello, Dad. Grace. Silence. You look well. I am. He nodded, then looked away. I suppose you got what you wanted. I didn't want your company. Then what did you want? I looked at him. This man who once told me I asked too many questions. Who used my signature like a wrench. Who sent me a 14-word severance via text. I wanted to be seen. He didn't reply. You still can't do it, can you? I said. Even now. With everything burned down, you can't say I mattered. I built everything for this family, he muttered. That should have been enough. You built walls. Not legacy. And with that I walked away. 3 months later, on a crisp fall morning, I stood in front of 76 guests at our wedding overlooking Lake Union, sunlight catching the water just as Daniel reached for my hands. With you. He said I never had to audition. And I knew in that moment. I had broken the cycle. We danced under string lights and drank too much wine and laughed until our cheeks ached. And later that night, just before slipping out of my heels, I pulled out the photo Ethan had sent me. Clara Grace. She would grow up knowing truth didn't need permission. That her name wasn't collateral. That love wasn't something you earned by being quiet. So if you're watching this and you've ever been erased from your own story, please hear me. You don't have to stay silent to belong. You don't have to co-sign someone else's control just to feel worthy. You get to write your name on your terms. Drop a comment if you've ever had to walk away to find peace. Or if you're still standing at that line, unsure which side is yours. I see you. And you're not alone.